This is the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast. I'm Dalton Gray.
And I'm Moriah Humphreys.
Broadcasting from our hometown of Fairbanks, Alaska. This show is brought to you by Stealthy Hunter. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, everybody. I'm Dalton Gray.
I'm Mo.
And we appreciate you joining us for another discussion this week on bullet selection for big game hunting in Alaska. A couple weeks ago, we had a conversation about cartridge selection, which was more of just a discussion on what you do and don't need. It was less of an in-depth discussion on particular cartridges.
Yeah.
It was more about just kind of addressing some things that are, well, that we had gotten some questions about and some other things that are going on.
Some popular issues in the hunting space.
One could call that a trend.
Yeah, it's a trending topic. Yeah.
Or a fad. Could be a fad.
Some of it's a little bit fatty. It didn't come out the way I had planned it, yeah.
So today we're going to talk about bullets, as we promised in that episode. This is kind of the part 2 to that discussion. Bullet selection for Alaska big game. Well, what have we used so far? What did you start out with?
Bullets?
Yeah.
Corlocks?
Remington
Corlocks.
The deadliest mushroom in the woods.
The green and yellow box. Yeah.
The classic.
Do you know why?
Cheap.
Yeah, it was the cheapest thing on the shelf that said it was for hunting.
And back then it was how much for a box of .6?
$25.
Yeah.
Back then being what? 10 years ago?
Yep. Years ago. And now you're lucky to buy a box of Barnes for less than $80 for 20 rounds.
That's crazy. Sick.
I mean, I'm sure.
Because I remember
sometimes
expensive ammo for an .6 was like 45 or 50.
Yeah.
Right? That was always the...
I know that you can still get something like Hornady Precision Hunter ELDXs for an .6 for $40, $50 or so.
I mean, that doesn't seem bad to me.
Yeah.
But with today's economy, I mean.
Right. And there have been times where I've been able to find .6 Barnes for $50, $60, but still more expensive than it used to be. But
I think I have some .6 Barnes.
Yeah, I do. My wife used to shoot that out of her gun, and then we switched .6 rifles for her, and she's been shooting that Precision Hunter 178 grain ELDX. She's killed a few animals with that now. And so have I, too. I shot a couple of deer with that last year.
You know, that actually just kind of makes that point that I made last week.
Which is?
Load a bullet right, and it really doesn't matter what cartridge you shoot.
Yeah.
178 out of a 30-06, especially being the type of bullet it is.
It shoots good out of that gun.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
It's nothing spectacular. There are other bullets that gun shoots better that we have a lot of. One of them is the Seiko or Sako name brand ammunition, and it's just 180 grain lead-nosed bullet. It's got a horrible ballistic coefficient. It drops like a rock, but it shoots pretty good tight groups.
You know, BC matters less and less the more you think about how far you're actually shooting when you're hunting.
Well, and you know, for a gun that my wife shoots on game out to a couple hundred yards, it's perfectly fine.
Right.
And that one, I think the bullets that we have from that Seiko ammunition, I think those are bonded.
I think they are, yeah.
I don't think we've shot any animals with that, but I've got a ton of it because it was cheap. And I was surprised. Well, I haven't found a lot of it lately, not at least in that quantity. I know I bought, I think it was 2 cases of it. I found it because it was very, very reasonably priced. I think it was like $35 or $40 a box.
Well,
so I got a good deal, and so now we have a ton of that and good brass to reload with down the road. We haven't done any reloading for the .6 though. Haven't really had.
No, I don't think I've loaded mine either. Yeah, of all the cartridges. I mean, I load what I use.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't load. Just for people's perspective here, and they listening to when I talk about reloading. I think the same goes for you. I don't load bullets up to match I don't load bullets up to go to the range. I load to hunt, and therefore 100 bullets can last me a pretty long time, as long as I don't have to sight in too much and don't miss too many shots.
Yeah. Or you don't have your rifle thrown around by
right. Obviously,
yeah.
you take, really, hopefully 1 or 2 shots is all it takes to know you're on.
Yep.
But anyway.
So bullets are arguably or not arguably more important than your cartridge selection.
I think they're a lot more important.
I agree with you. We kind of talked about that briefly in the last episode 2 weeks ago, where we said that anymore, if we're trying to choose a new cartridge or a rifle platform, or, whatever the case may be there, that most of the time we're going to look at bullet weights and velocities that we want to push those bullets at before we even choose a cartridge. And then we'll go and find a cartridge that will accomplish those specifics. So, talking about bullets today, we're going to kind of go over briefly what is available in the hunting space, very basically. We've got a handful of recovered bullets that I have accumulated over the years. We've got some non-bonded, some bonded bullets, some monometal bullets, and even a hard cast sitting here. Just to kind of have a little visual aid of what these bullets look like after they get pulled out of an animal.
Right.
Obviously, there are dozens and dozens more of bullets that I have killed animals with, or that friends and family have killed animals with me being there, that we have not recovered, that have shot through. But it kind of always just makes me smile when we kill an animal and we find a bullet.
You get to pull it out,
Sometimes that makes you go, that didn't go all the way through.
Right.
And it's kind of a head scratcher, but most of the time it just makes me excited. Like, we found the bullet. So, just a basic overview, and just to kind of preface this, we're not going to talk a lot about match bullets in this episode. I know that is a topic of conversation, a trend that's going on in the hunting industry right now. And there have been a lot of guys that have been doing it for years and years, even before this has become a more popular topic of conversation. But because we haven't used match bullets, we're not going to talk about it. I guess our recommendation is we would prefer to always use something that is more controlled expansion. It is designed for hunting.
Right.
Therefore, it is arguably more predictable. I know there are folks that have different opinions about that. But if you talk to any manufacturer, just for liability purposes, there's a reason that they put match bullet as the label on a particular projectile.
Yeah, and if you look, even and like I've got the manual for spear.
Yeah.
No, not spear.
Sierra.
No, Sierra. Yeah, if you look in the Sierra manual, they will specifically show, these match bullets are not intended for hunting.
Right.
Because.
And it's not to say that they don't work.
Right.
And I know that in a lot of cases they do work, and they work quite well. But again, because we haven't done it, we're not really going to talk about it, and our stance on it for the time being is that we don't shoot them, not on big game up here. It'd be something that I wouldn't mind shooting a deer with, or maybe even a caribou, but I'm not interested in shooting a moose with one. I'm not interested in shooting a bear with one. It's just my on it, and that doesn't make me right or wrong on it. It just means that I haven't done it, so I don't have any platform to stand on and really have an opinion about it based on my experience. So, the original bullet, I guess all the way back to the beginning, with spire pointed bullets, right? Started out as flat-based Spitzers. There's a lead core, nothing fancy, copper or gilding metal jacket, and they were designed to just mushroom. As that has evolved, something that would be easily recognizable, as we mentioned earlier, is the ELDX. Now, it's a very sleek, modernized version of a cup and core bullet.
Right.
We would call that, because there's a cup of copper that is then filled with lead, and then, in the case of the ELDX, is encased in copper, and then there's a polymer tip on the end of it. But at its core, no pun intended, it's just a lead core bullet. There's no chemical or mechanical bonding process. There is an interlock ring that is designed to kind of be a little bit of a crimp on the shank of that bullet to keep it from expanding too far and just totally flattening out. The core lock has a very similar concept, as well as the Hornady interlock bullet. But basically, just in very rudimentary terms, that's a cup and core lead bullet. Nothing super special about those. They're not normally designed to be ultra high weight retention, which means after you shoot an animal with them and you say you were to recover that bullet, typically a cup and core soft bullet is not going to weigh very much compared to its original weight. And then kind of moving on from that, we have more of a new concept is the bonded bullet. Now, it's by no means new anymore, but it's a chemical process where they kind of weld the lead core to the copper jacket.
Right.
And that keeps the lead core from being sucked out of that copper jacket during expansion. And so therefore you get higher weight retention, which therefore keeps your momentum higher because it's a heavier projectile. And so in theory, it'll penetrate further into an animal. And then you have monometal base bullets with a lead core in the front half. And in that case, the bullets that I have to reference for that would be something like a Federal Terminal Ascent, which is a copper base with a lead core in the front end that's bonded front end of that bullet. So very high weight retention bullet, and by design meant to hold a lot of its weight, but it expands more rapidly, kind of mirroring the expansion characteristics of a typical lead core bullet, but holding together.
Right.
And even if that front section of lead becomes detached on impact or through the animal, heavy contact with bone perhaps, even if that lead core is sheared out or ripped off, you still have the copper shank at the back end that'll continue to drive that bullet deeper into the animal.
It kind of mimics, it's like a hybrid between a traditional bonded and something like a Barnes.
Right. And that concept came about a long time ago with the introduction of the trophy bonded bear claw bullet, which was an old flat base with a copper base and a lead front end core that was bonded. And that was and still is a very popular heavier caliber dangerous game type load, for Cape buffalo and hunting in Africa, and then for hunting brown bears up here. I know a lot of people that at least used to shoot the trophy bonded bear claw, but that has since evolved into what is now the Federal Terminal Ascent, is the sleeker, more heavier for caliber for like the 30 cals and the 284s and whatnot. You have lighter bullet options that are built with that same construction, and these ones, the Terminal Ascent has a polymer tip, and so they have good BCs. And then you have the full-on monometal design, which is 100% copper, or in the case of something like a Hornady, CX now, what used to be the GMX, is I think they said it was something like a 95 to 5% ratio of copper and zinc. So the old GMX, it was a gilding metal compound, is what they said.
I see.
And so I'm sure the CX is similar in the materials that it uses.
I assume something like Extreme Penetrator, right? All brass bullet. Would that be considered a monometal as well? I
don't think the penetrators are all brass. I thought those were copper.
And a lot of them are that brass color.
Yeah. I thought the Extreme Penetrator, you're talking about the ones from Underwood, right?
So you've got your Underwood Extreme Penetrators. I'm thinking more, and that may not be the actual name for them. That's just kind of what's attributed to them. But remember those old, the brass ones, like for the 4570?
Yeah.
Right.
So there's certainly some brass.
So would that be considered a monometal?
Sure.
Right. Just it's not going to perform the same way.
Right.
As a monometal. For what? It's brass. I mean.
Right. But something for like the original copper bullet was the old Barnes X.
Yeah.
And that was a bullet that was designed to expand in the form of petals that would peel back and sort of mirror the mushrooming effect of a lead bullet, but not lose any of its weight. So you had extremely high weight retention, oftentimes 95% plus. Most of the time, in a perfect world, if you shoot a Barnes bullet into an animal, it's going to weigh 99% or 100%. If you shoot a tipped Barnes bullet, I've recovered a few of those that weigh exactly what they were when you shot them, minus the little blue tip. So that idea is it retains all of its weight, so therefore it maintains its momentum through the penetration of the animal, and it'll drive deeper. Kind of mixed in there is the old partition design, which is still being used today. John Nosler came up with that in the 1940s, I believe it was, in the late 40s. And he built the partition after having what he deemed was bullet failure. I think it was while he was on a moose hunt up here, or possibly Canada. But he shot a moose what he felt like was too many times, and he felt like the bullets weren't up to the task. And I'm sure they were just old cup and core design bullets.
Right.
And so he returned home, designed and built the partition, which is, think of like that copper jacket, but it
meets in the middle.
But it cuts in half. It cuts that lead core in half. And there's no bonding in the partition. And so the front half of the bullet with the lead core is meant to violently expand, just like any old lead core bullet with no bonding. So you get that massive shock and trauma inside the animal. But once that front core is dissipated, then the back half of the bullet will continue on through the animal.
So it's a thicker jacket too than a lot of cup and cores, right?
The front half of partition comes apart pretty quick.
Okay.
It does, and that is the design. Now, the Swift A-frame is the same design profile, I guess you could use that word. For the jacket, it's built with that H jacket where the center of the bullet is cut in half, but the Swift A-frame is bonded.
Okay.
So the Swift A-frame is a much higher weight retention version of what would be a Nosler partition. That's kind of a middle ground as well. For hunting in Alaska, undoubtedly the Remington Core Locked and the Hornady Interlock, they've killed a ton of animals.
Yeah.
You know, the old Sierra cup and core bullets.
You know, I was just talking to a
There's
buddy,
nothing wrong with those bullets.
a guy at work today, and he doesn't have enough good things to say about the SSTs.
Oh yeah.
Really didn't matter what I said, it seemed like. But I didn't really argue with him about it. I just like, hey, I think you should try the ELDXs if you like those.
Yeah.
Right. They'll shoot good, and I think they're more reliable on bigger game up here.
Yeah, yeah. So the SST is the Super Shock tip,
right,
which is made by Hornady. It's basically meant to be a more violently expanding version of something like the ELDX. Now, the SST preceded the ELDX, but it has a polymer tip. You know, it's got a boat tail, but that's designed for thinner skinned game. You know, rapid expansion. Not so much concerned about weight retention in that bullet. You're just looking for fast, dramatic expansion to kill a lighter animal. I'm sure on something like a caribou.
Oh yeah, he shot a ton of deer with them. He said,
yeah,
he loved them for that.
It'd be an excellent deer bullet.
Yeah.
I've shot blacktails with them out of a 300 RCM.
You know, blacktail with that?
I did one time. Yeah, it was dramatic, like swallowing a hand grenade for those deer. It was too much meat damage for my taste. But I'm also shooting a 300 RCM at that point, so you're shooting them pretty quick. Not ideal for those little deer.
Right.
Not by a long shot. But so that being kind of the breakdown of what we're going to kind of talk about today. What is the best bullet for hunting in Alaska? There probably isn't one best bullet for hunting anywhere, really. You could make the case that, well, I just hunt with a Barnes for everything. And you can certainly do that. But in some situations, you're going to wish that you had a different style bullet, and we'll talk about that in depth when we get to the Barnes section of this episode. Weight does play a factor in bullet selection. If you want to shoot a light and fast, flat trajectory bullet, and you're only ever going to shoot out to 400 or 500 yards, and you want something that's just fast and flat, you have to think about can your bullet withstand the impact velocity that you're going to have out to 200-300 yards? If you're shooting, say, 130 or 140 grain weight class bullet out of a 6.5 300 Weatherby, and you're shooting a non-bonded cup and core bullet, something like a Hornady Interlock, and you shoot a moose with that, say you hit the shoulder at 100 yards, that bullet is all but going to come apart. It might go deep enough to kill it, but it might not. But that's not what that bullet in that cartridge is designed to do. In the same offering of ammo, you could select the 127 grain Barnes LRX that will retain much more of its weight, even if it sheds its pedals, and it'll still get into the vitals at shoulder shot.
Right.
So bullet selection does depend on weight and the velocity that you're going to be pushing it at. For instance, something like a 30-06 is very easy to get away with a lot of bullet choices.
Right. You're not going too fast and you're not going too slow.
Right. You don't run the risk with a 06 as much of point blank impact velocity is only ever going to be 2,700, maybe 2,750 with
something super light. You
with a 180 grain class bullet, right? But with a 150, you could be up closer to 3,000.
Yeah.
But with typical factory hunting ammunition, you're going to be 165s, 180s, and those are probably the most common weight classes for Alaska. Most of them are just 180s.
I had some core locks that were 220s for that.
Yeah, I remember that. The old round nose.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was practically a slug.
Practically.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever shot anything with them, but I don't remember. I probably did.
I thought you did.
I don't know if I did with the 220s. I know I did with the 180s.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the 180s, but that being the case, you have a lot of versatility within, say, a 30 caliber.
Right.
You can shoot with a 06 factory ammo up to 100, 220 grains, all the way down to a 150, sometimes even less.
Right.
For lighter skin game. But those ultralight bullets oftentimes aren't heavy controlled expansion designed bullets. They're designed for what that weight class of bullet at that velocity is built to do. Light stuff. Now something like 150 grain Barnes would be fine in a 06 for a moose. Be totally fine. But 150 grain core locked or, Federal Power Shock or something like that, or Winchester Power Point or something like that might not be ideal. It'd do it, and there's guys that have done it. But we're talking about in an ideal world here. And we have so many options on the shelves today just for factory ammo, reloading aside, that there's really not an excuse for why you shouldn't just try to tinker around and find something a little bit better if that's what you've been shooting. The bullet is the only thing that connects you to the animal before you walk up to it and it's dead. So why would you cheap out?
Yeah, no, I agree.
I hate to say that, but
especially on most of our game up here being a lot bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, even a caribou is significantly bigger than a deer.
Yep.
And so where something like an SST is very reliable on most species of deer that have the word deer in it. As soon as you get out of the ones that have the word deer in it, you start getting to the bigger, the caribou, the moose, right?
Yep.
I sure wouldn't want to have that in my rifle when I'm hunting brown bear.
Right.
Like, it's just not reliable.
Right. So we're going to go ahead and put a couple of bullets here on the screen for you guys. These are a couple of recovered cup and core bullets. These are not bonded. These are just simple cup and core designs. These happen to be ELDXs. And I guess I overused the word simple there. These bullets are not simple, but their construction is relatively simple in that it's just a copper jacket and a lead core. Now, those bullets, the two on the left there in that frame, the lead core remained intact. The one on the far right, the lead core kind of popped out of that copper jacket. I pulled it out of that animal. The one on the far right was shot into a caribou, and I believe the other two on the left were also recovered out of caribou. And the impact velocity on those was all relatively similar. Those were all within a couple hundred yards shooting distance. So not extreme high velocity impact. Those were all fired out of a 7 rem mag, and those were a starting weight of 162 grains. So you can see that there's not a ton left of those bullets, especially the one on the far right. But the one on the far right I know was the closest impact, that being about 80 yards or so. That's pretty typical of what you would expect to be left of a lead core, non-bonded,
right?
No frills, no fancies design bullet. For that construction, that's about what you'd expect. Rapid expansion, big wound cavity, a lot of damage in a short amount of time, but the faster you drive it, therefore the closer range that your impact is, and the heavier your target medium is, the thicker, and especially when you add in bone, the more damage it's going to do to that bullet throughout the penetration line that it's going to go through. So that's kind of what you would expect to see from a cup and core bullet. Not a whole lot of weight retention. I don't have all the numbers written down for all these, and I don't have my scale on hand here to weigh all these again. I should have grabbed that. But I know that the average weight retention amongst those ELDXs was between 35 and 50%, depending on the ones that we're talking about here. I know this one in the middle was the heaviest one. The one on the left was about in the middle, and the one on the right obviously was the least weight retention, which adds up with their impact distances. So you can see the difference in how that bullet reacted with the different impact velocities. Therefore, again, the heavier the bullet it is, and this is particularly important for the lead core bullets. Generally speaking, the heavier your bullet is, the more weight retention you're going to have. Therefore, the greater penetration potential that you have on your hands, barring heavy bone impact. From there, we have a bullet that I shot a lot of out of the 7 mag once again, and this is the Nosler AccuBond 160 grain bullet. So this is a copper jacketed lead core bonded bullet. Same rifle, almost the same weight. Get that one to stand up there. And so those are more typical of what you would see from a bonded bullet. You can see here in comparison on the top is the Hornady ELDX that we showed before. And you can see the difference in how much weight that ELDX lost and how much more of that lead is missing off of the bullet when compared to the AccuBond. The animals that those were shot with are just as dead, but a little bit different bullet performance. Arguably, the penetration wasn't really that much better with the AccuBond. 160 grain AccuBond, 162 grain ELDX, shot into a caribou. And none of those shots were extreme quartering angles. So you could argue there's really not a whole lot of difference. The main difference, though, was on the animal with meat damage. They didn't die any faster. They didn't die any slower, one compared to the other. But the meat damage, I noticed, was a lot less with the AccuBonds. With the ELDXs, with that more rapid expansion, there was always a lot more meat damage. And so I ended up shooting those for those caribou because I just didn't like destroying as much meat.
And you had other options, yeah.
Yeah, and I have other options, and that's part of the fun. We talked about that in the last episode about cartridges. A lot of the fun with tinkering with cartridges and bullets is I just like to try different things.
Right. Well, and there's also...
within reason.
With the less rapid expansion of a bonded, there's somewhat less rapid expansion, but with the weight retention, you don't have pieces of bullet flying whichever direction that's easiest for them to go.
Yeah.
To some extent, you don't have that as much. Yeah. And also, some would argue that you have a little bit of a bigger wound channel because once that bullet expands, you retain that size, just like we're looking at in the camera here, of a much, much bigger bullet than initially went in versus much smaller size of what most cup and core would do once they lose a lot of weight.
Yeah. Now, there's another one that I have here that I believe is a different caliber that I was just looking at this here, and I'm going to check something real fast.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive that this is a Federal Fusion.
Okay.
Which is also a bonded lead core bullet. And that was shot out of a 300 Win Mag. And that's what I shot my first moose with.
Okay.
And that was give or take 100 yards or so. And that was a broadside shot. Bonded lead core bullet. So again, you can see how that lead almost sticks to that jacket on the inside.
Right.
When compared to the ELDX, which is not bonded. Not that there's a right or wrong there, but we're just showing you the difference.
Yeah, giving you the facts.
Yeah, you can make your own decision.
Right.
This is just what we've got in front of us. And then moving on from there, this is one of those Federal Terminal Ascent bullets. This is out of a 300 Win Mag. And all three of these were recovered out of the same moose this year that I shot. Now, the one on the far right there is expanded
sideways,
kind of an odd way.
Yeah. You think that one hit bone?
That one hit bone for sure.
Yeah, and then it probably went in and went like that.
Went a little bit of an angle.
Yeah.
The one here in the middle is about as picture perfect as you could get. I mean, the jacket peeled behind the bullet all the way to the base. That's about as perfect a performance as you could ask for a bonded lead core bullet. And these two weighed, I believe it was 90% plus for those two on the left. And I believe the one on the right lost a little bit more. But again, heavy bone impact. And this is my mistake for not having all these weights written down and logged, or at least to have the scale on hand.
Right.
But you can visibly see the difference there. And those were 200 grain factory load terminal ascents out of a 300 Win Mag. And the impact distance on those was 80 yards. So relatively high velocity.
Have you ever shot anything with those a little bit further?
Nope. This was the first animal that I'd ever shot with a terminal ascent. And again, this was just for curiosity. I had shot animals with other bullets before and after this, and I tried to get those to shoot out of my 7 mag with the 155 grain version for the 284.
They just wouldn't shoot.
They didn't shoot well out of my 7 mag, which was disappointing. That was one of the only factory loads that gun did not like. And that was disappointing. I really thought they would have shot well, but for some reason they just didn't shoot very well. Didn't shoot a tight group. So on a whim, I picked up a box of these at the end of this summer and shot a box or two through my 300. Checked them and thought, all right, well, these are shooting consistently well through this gun, so I'm going to give them a shot. Even though I have a bunch of other 300 Win Mag options to shoot, I wanted to shoot these ones.
Right.
And they worked well. They did their job. They held their weight very well and penetrated quite deep through that moose. One of these, this one here actually on the left, was the neck shot. So it didn't go nearly as far, but it did hit the bone of the vertebrae, which is a pretty stout piece of bone. But at 80 yards.
Right. So interesting. One thing here is you've got 3 bullets. What would you say, 80 yards and 200 yard shots or so? Was that what they were looking at here?
No.
Exactly.
So this one here was on the far left was at 80. The other two on the right were a little bit less than 80.
Okay.
And
so even at that close range, you still recovered them all.
Yeah.
No, nothing exited.
Yeah, nothing shot through, which was kind of
interesting.
surprising. They did expand pretty wide.
Yeah.
That's
they definitely slowed down a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of resistance there. And that's something that we'll talk about with the monometal bullets.
Right. I just wanted to bring that up while we've got
on
the camera.
That's a great point to bring up there. No pass-throughs. And I've shot other moose with different bullets that shot through them. And I've seen other moose that have been shot through by seemingly lighter, less weight for sure, and bullets that I would have more so expected to stay in the moose that didn't. So, kind of an interesting comparison to make there. From there, we'll get these out of the way. Just to kind of go back, this one's just more for fun. This is a 375 Ruger bullet. You want to guess what that was shot with?
What do you mean?
The animal.
I'm guessing that's a bear.
What kind of bear?
Brown bear. Really?
That was a black bear.
Wasn't that one black bear, was it? Was a black bear?
It was a black bear. Okay. Several years ago. Shot with a 375 Ruger at about 16 yards. And that was a frontal shot.
That's why it didn't exit, huh?
So I hit him high. I was up in a stand.
Mm-hmm.
And I shot him between the neck and the top of the shoulder. And it angled through, went through the back leg, and I found it underneath the hide on the backside. So it went diagonally lengthwise through the whole bear and stopped. And that is a non-bonded cup and core Hornady interlock, basically, in their 375 Ruger line of ammunition, 270 grains. And that one lost quite a bit of weight. I do have the weight recorded of that one, but my phone is on the tripod, and so I can't reference that weight right now. But it did lose a significant amount of weight. But cup and core, non-bonded, it's designed to do that.
Right.
It dumps a lot of energy or shock, I guess we could say, inside that animal. The bear didn't go anywhere. He made a quick hop and then just kind of laid there and kicked and did the chicken and went to sleep. Did his job.
Yeah.
But interesting note as far as how far it went through the bear, that made me think, I don't know that I would want to shoot that bullet into a brown bear lengthwise.
Yeah.
For a backup shot while I was guiding.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that it would make it all the way through from stem to stern.
Yeah.
Or from stern to stem as it runs away.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, so something to think about there too is, so yeah, it almost looks like a bonded that we were just looking at, right? The difference being that's a 375.
Right.
And so that's just a much bigger version of those.
There's a lot more mass.
ELDXs that we were looking at earlier, right? And see how little shank is left there. Yeah. It's just a little bit of lead in the base. And, and so, and that's also too where if maybe you wouldn't want to use something like that on a bigger animal.
Yeah.
And maybe you wouldn't have even wanted to use a smaller cup and core on something like a black bear, perhaps. But you put enough lead to where it doesn't really matter that you shed half of it.
Yeah.
Because it's a big enough bullet.
Right.
And that's where caliber selection does come into play a little bit.
I would say that for a black bear, I would be comfortable shooting something at a bait.
Oh, yeah.
Easily with something like a 243.
Yeah. So I absolutely, I agree with that. I'm just making the comparison of a big, heavy bullet to begin with. That's something like a cup and core. Yeah. Versus a smaller bullet that's a cup and core, right? Where that smaller bullet may only weigh 20% depending of its original weight if you recover it. Yeah. Whereas that big one might weigh, even though it lost a lot of weight, it may weigh more than that a light one did to begin with.
I want to say that bullet right there, the frame, weighed 150 or so grains.
Right.
After the fact, somewhere around there.
So exactly. So when you recovered it, it weighed the weight of a lot of bullets that you're hunting an animal with.
Right. It weighed the starting weight.
Right. And so therefore, its construction was a little bit less of a factor just because of the nature of what you were shooting.
Exactly. Just because you have more mass. Right. Moving on from there, this one we'll just touch on briefly. This is a Nosler partition. It was the one bullet that I recovered out of my first brown bear that I ever shot for myself. This was started out as a 300 grain Nosler partition shot out of a 375 H&H. And that shot distance was about 60 yards or so, 65 maybe. But you can see right there, the inside of the front end of that bullet, just copper. That's because that frontal lead core expanded, came out of that bullet, and then in the back, you can see more lead right there. So that is the back half of the bullet. And that is exactly how the Nosler partition is designed to expand inside of an animal.
I see this and I think of that Met plat like that.
Yeah.
Right, Met plat being the diameter of the face of the penetrating part of the bullet. And huge amount of, that's a huge wound cavity and a very powerful one because you've got that concave face.
Yep.
I mean, there's bullets that are designed that way.
Yep.
Right.
And that Nosler partition is designed to retain about 65% of its weight, and that's exactly what that one weighed. So whatever 65% is of 300, you can do your own math, folks. Now we're on to the monometals. This one is interesting because of all the ones that I've got sitting here, these are Barnes, and I have 3 different Barnes bullets. This is what you would expect to see a typical Barnes bullet recovered out of an animal. So there's your copper petals peeled back to the bottom of that cavity in the nose of the bullet. That looks perfect, right? Maybe a little bit of the petals are gone there, broken off, but expanded down to the bottom of that hollow point. Looks good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's supposed to.
That's at normal velocity. The problem with monometals traditionally is as you get to lower impact velocities, you have less and less expansion. And so on that one, you have a lot lower impact velocity and a lot less resistance through the animal.
Right.
And so the bullet didn't expand as much.
Right. Smaller wound cavity.
Right. Smaller wound cavity.
Wound channel.
Which normally leads to a slower death, which can mean a longer blood trail, more difficult recovery. In this one's case, this one was shot into a caribou as well. And it took that caribou a minute to fall over dead. Yeah. It took it a little bit. It was not ideal performance. So then you have the relatively high impact velocity Barnes bullet, where it peels down farther, destroys the front end of that bullet, and
expands somewhat rapidly,
right,
which causes those petals to come off.
And then the petals came off, and so you're left with that squared off shank. Now this bullet resulted in a really fast.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me, but
that one was shot into a black-tailed deer.
Okay.
Out of a 30-06. And the reason that it sheared off those petals was the only shot angle that shooter was given was a steeply quartering away shot. And that bullet entered into the back leg, broke the femur, went up all the way through the guts, through the stomach, through the chest cavity, and then up at the base of the neck and stuck underneath the offside hide. You had that little trampoline effect there with the offside hide oftentimes, and that's what will catch that bullet. And that's where that bullet was. So because you had a lot more resistance with that femur impact in the back leg at a relatively close impact velocity, although a 30-06, and that was 180 grain TTSX, that's not a real hard medium, or I'm sorry, not a real high impact velocity.
No,
right?
It's not. Yeah.
So it's like 2750 muzzle velocity. Okay. And so your impact velocity being less than that, it's still not going all that fast. That same bullet out of a 300 Win Mag would have been going 150 feet a second faster or more.
Or more, yeah.
But even with the slower velocity of a 06, the resistance that it encountered upon impact was enough that it broke off those petals, but the shank that was left continued to penetrate, went up, and disrupted vital function of that deer, and the shank essentially killed that deer.
Right.
And it was going fast enough still that it created enough of a wound channel to disrupt the lungs and kill that deer.
Right. And my guess is the petals probably came off because it hit the femur.
I'm sure they did, yeah.
Yeah.
If I remember right, we found one or two of those little chunks of copper in the back leg after it had hit the femur. So this one always intrigued me with having 3 different Barnes bullets at 3 different impact velocities, different mediums, different target. And that led me to think, what if there was a way to make this happen every time?
Mm-hmm.
Because contrary to what I always thought about bullets, I always pictured a copper bullet as designed to expand back those petals, shear those petals back a little bit, and then that creates a nice large frontal surface area.
Right.
That pushes through the animal because it's still heavy. That disrupts everything. It cuts through it. It kills it. But when this bullet was recovered, and the quickness with which that one killed, even though it wasn't an ideal shot angle, it made me think, what if you could get a copper bullet to do that in the chest? Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to get this if you shoot a deer broadside in the chest.
No.
You're not going to get that result.
Anything.
Yeah.
Shooting a broadside in the chest.
Right. You're going to have something that looks more like the bullet here on the right if you have a broadside shot.
Right.
And that's if you even recover it. Because you and I have shot a lot of animals with Barnes bullets over the years.
Never seen them again.
That we've never seen because there's 2 holes.
Yeah.
Broadside shots, normally, that Barnes bullet is gone.
Yeah.
And we always thought, that's fine.
There's a lot of chest shots and other shots and whatnot that they're gone. They're just because they're hard and they're heavy and they don't have a huge frontal diameter that's slowing them down rapidly.
Right. And so that's a good point to make is you look at the expanded diameter of 230 caliber bullets. The nose on this terminal Ascent is a lot bigger, expanded, than the nose on the Barnes bullet is. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
And it's not much to us, but at the speed that those bullets are going through that animal, every little bit counts. That's why there's a difference between the displacements a difference between a 243 and a 300 Win Mag. Obviously, velocity aside. But if you were to push both bullets of their respective weights at the same velocity through the same target medium, your wound cavity is going to be bigger or smaller depending on the expanded diameter of the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why a lot of people that we know were hesitant to shoot copper bullets for a long time because they felt like, well, they just don't kill as fast. You and I both know people, one person in particular, who never really liked shooting copper bullets because of that factor.
Right.
They felt like it doesn't kill them fast enough. It's like shooting them with a bow. Now, we both shot animals with bows.
Bows can kill very fast.
It's not like shooting them with a bow, and that's not a good comparison. And yes, a bow can kill something extremely fast. We've both had bow kills that have killed things much faster than some things that we even shoot with a rifle. Not that that's how it always goes, but that's a different topic for a different time. But the point being that they wanted something that expanded faster, created more damage. They weren't really concerned with if that bullet exited the animal or not.
Right.
You think back to, at the end of the day, everything in this pile of bullets here is dead.
Yeah.
We just have the luxury of sitting around now and saying, well, which one did we like how it did the job the best?
Right.
And why do we think that worked? And you have to shoot different bullets through different animals at different ranges, at different velocities, different cartridges, hit them in different spots, quartering, broadside, steep quartering, through heavy bone sometimes, to really get a sense to see what are these bullets doing when they hit from this angle, at this velocity, with this cartridge, with this weight, or with a lighter weight. What if they hit a femur? And so you eventually come around to the fact that everybody is going to have something that they are drawn to. And really, at the end of the day, it can almost be misleading on what you think works the best, because naturally, you're going to think the animal that died the fastest, I want to use that bullet, and I want to keep my distances at that range or less, and I want to shoot him in that spot every time. And the reality is that if that was your only judgment, then I would want to shoot every deer with a Barnes bullet in the back leg at 70 yards or less, and I would want that bullet to break off its petals. The luxury is that we have bullets that will do that when you shoot them broadside, that are copper bullets. So everybody's going to have an opinion about it.
Yep.
The best thing you can do a little bit of research. You know, I found a YouTube channel yesterday, and admittedly, I have watched a lot of these videos.
Is that one of the videos you sent me?
Yeah.
Okay. I like the way that video was put together.
That guy's channel, I mean, his ballistic test videos are short, to the point.
Yeah.
No frills, no fancies, and he does exactly what you want to see. And what he's doing is getting these results in ballistics gelatin, which is not a perfect test medium.
It's not, but it's a test medium that we have that we can test consistency with.
It's consistency, exactly. You're not trying to stick a chunk of bone into it, and then you may hit it in the center, or you might hit it on the edge. And so it's not really predictable. What ballistics gel does is gives you an idea of apples to apples in this testing medium. What will this bullet look like at full expansion?
Right.
What does that temporary wound channel look like? And so that it's an interesting starting point on a bullet selection. That's all this is here. This pile of lead and copper is just the few things that have been recovered in my little collection.
Right.
Over relatively a short amount of time. I have a lot left to learn about this, but of the things that I've tinkered with. Now, I mentioned that I thought about the copper bullets, that I thought that this one and the performance of that bullet, with shearing off those petals, when that happened, I thought to myself, what if there was a way to replicate that? And there is. Now, this is a bullet that arguably is almost indistinguishable from that Barnes bullet.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Especially if you look at the way they reacted. I mean, there's some some differences in the actual way it was made. But
if you look at the nose of these bullets, they all kind of ended up the same way.
Yep.
Obviously, you know, the grooves in the side are a little bit different, if you can even notice that from the camera angle. But the way that they ended up is about the same. There's a couple of petals there left of them. So these bullets here in the foreground are hammer bullets. The one here in the back is the Barnes. The hammer bullets are designed to shed the petals when they go inside of an animal. Specifically made and engineered to dump those petals off fast.
Right.
Super fast. One of these bullets here was shot into a moose, One of these, I believe it was this one that was shot into a brown bear. This one is a little 284 that was shot into that deer that I killed here just a few weeks ago that we talked about in a couple episodes prior. These two started out as a 205 grain 338 caliber, and those were shot at 2,900 feet a second, give or take, a little bit higher than 2,900 feet a second out of a 338 Weatherby RPM. And the one on the far left was a 145 grain HHT.
Yeah.
Shot out of my 7 mag. And those were flying at 3,100 feet a second. Certainly too much smoke for those deer. But with the shot angle, I shot it straight on in the front of the chest, went all the way through, was sticking out the skin on the offside back leg. So it went through a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of material to get there. Some bone, some rib impact on the entrance. But those bullets are designed to immediately expand once they get inside.
Right.
And the petals are designed to shear off. So you have more of that hybridized result between something like a Nosler AccuBond. If I can get this one to stand up here. And folks, if you haven't figured this out, this is a visual type of episode. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you probably should be, because our conversation is more based on what we have in front of the screen here. What's our YouTube handle, Mo?
It is Great Alaska Hunting Company.
Great Alaska Hunting Company on YouTube.
Yeah.
Go look at the video there. So the difference in the middle ground between an AccuBond and a Barnes that we have found is the hammer bullet design. Now, there are other bullet companies that make a monometal type of bullet that is similar to like what the hammer does. And I know, I think just one person so far that has reloaded and shot those. I think they're made by Lehigh.
Yeah.
And there's a couple different versions of it. But the idea is very similar, where you have a copper bullet that is designed to rapidly expand and have that same idea that a lead core bullet would have of rapid expansion, big wound cavity, a lot of damage, but you still have a shank left over after all of that to continue on penetrate.
Right.
And that squared off front shank of one of these hammer bullets still does a lot of damage as it continues to go on through.
It does.
The interesting part, and I know that you've mentioned this before, is that what we have found is bigger entrance wounds with the hammer bullets.
The entrance and exit.
And exits.
Yeah.
But specifically,
entrance
wounds are much bigger on several of these bullets that we have shot into animals, whether it's moose, brown bear, caribou, deer,
black bear.
Yeah, black bears. But normally, like with the Barnes, sometimes I would have a hard time even finding the entrance hole.
Right, it's like you shot it with an FMJ.
Right, and then the exit, you could find a caliber size or caliber and a half size.
Maybe a finger or thumb hole side.
Yeah, something just bigger than that.
Yeah.
On the offside, where the bullet would exit. But with the hammers, oftentimes we would find a much larger than average entrance wound.
And back on the Barnes for a moment, if you shot an animal that was, if you shot through a very small amount of animal, right, not wide, whether it was a good vital shot, or let's say you shot it, let's say you shot a wolf through the mouth and it came out by the spine.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an oddly specific illustration.
It is, isn't it? And I've found where you get a pinhole in and out, to where it doesn't even have time to hardly start expanding without enough medium to actually go through and create that expansion. Yeah.
There's not enough pushback on that bullet to open it up. Yeah, that's something that I've seen with Barnes, you've seen with Barnes, and there was even a deer that another buddy of ours shot down deer hunting down there. Probably 4 or 5 years ago now.
Okay.
And he shot a deer with a TSX, 180 grain out of a 300 Win Mag. And the exit hole was pinhole, same size as the entrance. And inside that deer was not really messed up. It went in straight, came out straight. It didn't flip, didn't open up hardly, if any. Maybe it opened up a little bit smaller than this one, which is not opened up much.
See, I shot a moose about 400 yards with one that opened up less than that.
Yeah.
Where it just had just the briefest little, where the tip of it had just started to curl back.
And so that's where we talked about earlier with velocity matters a lot more with some of these bullet selections than with others. When you're shooting a copper bullet, for me anyway, I keep my maximum impact distance while hunting at 2,000 feet a second or more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that's enough to open it up and to do it well. I don't want, say I'm shooting a Barnes bullet, I don't
mean a minimum of 2,000.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't realize I said maximum. Minimum 2,000 feet a second, preferably more. And usually that falls within my normal hunting acceptable ranges, which is not anything past 500, and even that is a poke. But like with the Barnes bullet, I shot a caribou with a 150 grain Barnes bullet, TSX, a long ways away. And those bullets did not open up much at all. And it was past that 2,000 foot a second impact velocity. And I shot that caribou multiple times. And they were all good shots. I was able to watch the impacts. I had a muzzle brake on that gun. I watched the bullets hit it. And it would just stand there.
You mean above or below?
Below 2,000 feet a second.
Okay.
Yeah. It was definitely at the point of I shouldn't have been shooting them that far away. That was a user error on my part. Mm-hmm. Had I been shooting a different bullet, like say the 160 AccuBond or the 162 ELDX, would have been a totally different story.
Even an LRX.
Yeah, even an LRX, which is a softer version of like the TTSX from Barnes.
That is designed to open at quite a lot slower.
Right. Down to, I think they said 1,600 feet a second.
I don't remember. Some of them, like the ABLR from Nosler, which is a AccuBond long range.
Right.
I believe that
thinner
one is
frontal
like
jacket.
1,300 or something crazy low. Yeah.
Super, super low impact velocity. But what happens to that bullet at super close range?
Yeah.
I have heard some horror stories about the ABLR in particular, with even a 0.6, with shooting a 190, and that bullet just comes apart.
Some of those ABLRs have insanely good BCs, though.
Oh, yeah. But it doesn't make it the right choice for everything, right?
Right. Well, and it's, I shot quite a few things with the Barnes. That's what I hunted with primarily, just because they shot good.
Yep.
And I could find them at the time. You could find them for 0.6 and then 300 short mag for a while.
Yeah.
And so I shot quite a few things with those. And I had pretty good results, although, like you say, at close ranges, you just get that, you do get what we're looking at the camera right now. You do get that kind of result at a high speed with the Barnes.
Yep.
Where it just rips the pedals off.
Right.
And at far ranges, you just barely get it to open, and then usually you find the bullet. It doesn't even exit.
Yeah.
Because it's opening so slow that it's just slowing that bullet down so much already.
Right. That particular caribou that I shot at longer range than I should have been with that bullet, I didn't find any of those.
No, they didn't even expand.
I think I shot that bull 4 or 5 times. And during the process, he stood up from his bed and was walking away. Now, he was hurt, but when I went up to that caribou, my exits were barely bigger than my entrances. And so those bullets looked like this, but not even expanded that much.
Right. So you remember that caribou I shot with my short mag a few years ago?
The one in the wintertime?
Yes.
Yeah.
About 400 yards, 420 yards.
Yeah.
Right? Well, right there at a good range. And it was the caribou wasn't moving. Like, it was great setup, everything. You were spotting for me. Like, couldn't have been a better setup.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Right? Hardly any, not very much elevation difference.
It was a fun day of shooting.
A beautiful day, too.
Yeah.
Like, just no wind, sun came out, everything, right? It wasn't cold.
No packing.
Nope. Mostly just fighting with getting the snow machines back up onto the high ground. But anyhow, so I shot. I had picked out a bull. We talked about it. I fired. Actually, I don't remember if it was a bull or not, but I picked out a caribou, right? Yeah. And I fired, and you said missed. So I adjusted. Like, I don't know. I adjusted, 2 or 3 inches because, like, I didn't think I missed, but you say I missed. So I adjusted 2 or 3 inches up or down. I don't remember which. Fired. And you said missed again. Like, oh, no, it fell down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And we went up there, and the bullets were that far apart.
2 inches apart. Yep.
4 or 5 inches apart, right? Yep. Like, the amount I adjusted in the scope.
Yeah.
I sure felt good about that. And the difference was the fact that those were Barnes bullets. Mm. They didn't have a lot of expansion. They all exited. Not
a whole lot of resistance.
Not a lot of resistance on the caribou. And the caribou hardly know he was hit.
Yep.
Right.
Just stood there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, had I hit him with a Barnes or an old cup and core, he probably would have moved. I would think. I say Barnes.
Yeah.
I mean a bonded. A bonded or an old cup and core. I think we would have seen the fact that he was hit. You would have noticed it in his mannerism. Mm-hmm. Like you expect an animal to do, like something like a caribou to do when you shoot it up close with the 30-06s. You can see it happen. I shot a caribou with a cup and core. A friend of mine had shot it, wounded it, didn't know where he hit it, and he was having trouble with his gun, so I shot it at like 20 yards. It flipped the caribou over. And that was with that may have been like a 200 grain cup and core out of that .06.
Yeah.
And because it just something that we haven't talked about, that we don't really put much stock in, but it was because the energy dump.
Right.
Because it did indeed throw all that energy into that caribou immediately.
Yeah.
And that's when you saw that difference. Now you're real, you don't like talking about energy.
In the proper context.
Correct.
But you have to give it context.
And I don't think that energy really makes a big difference anymore. I think it did at one point, especially when you were shooting a lot of cup and core and bonded bullets, and that's all you really had. Even before bonded, energy was a big deal, right? It mattered how much energy you were hitting that animal with. And now with something like a Barnes, well, it may have whatever the numbers are. I don't even know what energy numbers look like. Let's say it has 2,000, what is it? Foot-pounds? Mm-hmm. Okay. When it hits the animal, and a lot of times you'll have around 2,000, you'll have a similar velocity to energy, depending, especially like a 30 cal, like a 300 Win Mag or something. You'll have a similar energy to muzzle or velocity at you'll have a point where they meet. Let's say that's 2,000. The thing with the Barnes is you might have 2,000 feet per second of muzzle velocity when you hit an animal at 150 yards or of energy, but if it goes through the animal, that energy did nothing for you. Right? The
energy imparted into the animal is determined by the expansion characteristics of the bullet.
Right.
And the expansion characteristics of the bullet also in part determined by the resistance that it meets.
Right.
Depending on your bullet type. So if you shoot a Barnes at a caribou and you don't hit bone at 400 and something yards, even with a 30 caliber Magnum round, because those were 165 grain TTSXs.
Yep.
Shooting out of your 300 short mag. Relatively fast bullets. And at 400 and something yards, I mean, I'm sure you could pull up your numbers right now of what those impact velocities would have been. I'm sure that had to have been north of 2,000 feet a second.
Yeah.
Had to have been. But because of how that bullet expands at that velocity and not hitting bone, it didn't cause enough.
Hydrostatic shock.
It didn't displace enough material inside the animal to cause that transfer of energy, which comes from an expanded front end with enough velocity to push it fast enough to create that permanent wound cavity.
If you don't mind, I want to talk about that for a minute. I think we're on a good point. See, now this is a really good way to hit something with a lot of energy. A hard cast, they don't go very far, they don't go very fast. But what you shoot them with up close.
I might disagree with you on this one.
So I've killed one bear, small bear with a 45-70, very similar bullet to what we're looking at. Yeah. It was like 420 grain. Don't know how fast it was going, probably like 18 or something at the most. And it was a small bear. It went all the way through and it exited, and it just plowed a hole all the way through that bear, and it flipped it over backwards.
What was that impact distance?
Hard to remember exactly. It wasn't far. Close. I'm going to say
yards, 15 yards.
Yards or less.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like bait distance.
Bait closer to bait distance.
Well, not at the one bait.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not like some of your typical baits where they're 60 yards away and they're sitting up there with a scope.
No. Nothing like that. No. And most of my baits, I never do that far away. But
I've never been that far away from a bait.
I don't think that hard casts are really having this discussion too much. I want to bring it up because the purpose of a hard cast is to plow a big hole.
So the purpose of a hard cast, at least in my mind, and this is, again, this is just an opinion. The purpose of a hard cast is to have a bullet that will just break things inside the animal and penetrate in a straight line.
Yeah.
The same idea that you have with a solid bullet.
Yeah.
Like for dangerous game, right? If you go and you want to shoot an elephant in the forehead in Africa, odds are you're going to be shooting a solid bullet. It's not built to expand. It's not meant to deform. It's meant to go in a straight line because its only purpose is to hit that brain. And you hit a brain, case in point, even you shoot a black bear in the forehead with a bow, that broadhead isn't expanding. All I have to do, I mean, you could kill a bear with a brain shot with a field point if you could get it to go through the skull. 100%.
Probably could.
I don't have any doubt that you could.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is come into contact with that brain, and it kills the animal. It hits that central nervous system. With a hard cast, the way that I think of a hard cast or a solid is it's designed to, no matter the angle, no matter what's in the way, it'll go through it and break stuff.
Yeah.
So forehead shot on a charging bear shot through the top of the back and you hit it in the top of the shoulder or in the spine, or you miss the spine, but it hits heavy bone and then it continues on and it goes through and it breaks the back hip.
And that's where that energy comes into play, because you're shooting a really heavy bullet, usually not very fast, but it's just dumping, or it's not necessarily dumping, but is using the energy behind that weight, which is displaced differently than an expanding bullet. Right. So it's a different kind of come from the rest of the discussion we've had.
Right. You do have a permanent wound cavity from a hard cast bullet, because the same way that, say, this bullet forces material away from itself as it goes through the animal, this one does the same thing. Not as dramatic of a way, though, because this bullet, the hammer, is being fired out of a cartridge at almost twice the speed sometimes of a bullet like this. And certainly your impact velocity, I mean, but if you shoot an animal at 100 yards with a hard cast bullet out of a 45-70, your impact velocity is pretty stinking low.
Yeah.
Whereas your impact velocity out of, say, this 338 205 grain bullet going 2,900 feet a second is much higher. But that bullet is designed to do that. But getting back to the main point here is, with the squared off front end of that shank on the hammer bullet, as it goes through, it forces the material off to the side as it goes through. And so it does still create a wound channel. Right. Even a field point has a wound channel.
Yep.
But it's pointed.
Just not usually very deep.
Right. And a full metal jacket shot through an animal, if it doesn't tumble, it's not going to do a whole lot of damage.
Right.
It does some, but full metal jackets are oftentimes more designed to tumble inside the animal, and that's what causes more damage. And that kills. 100% that'll kill an animal.
Yeah.
If it tumbles. If that's what that bullet is designed to
Right.
do. But in my mind, the flat nose, hard cast, non-expanding bullets. Now, sometimes you will get hard casts that will deform. If you hit heavy enough bone at the right angle.
It depends on the construction of the bullet material and everything else, yeah.
It certainly can deform a hard cast lead bullet. But the idea is that with a hard cast, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a lightweight hard cast bullet available in a 45-70.
It wouldn't make sense.
The majority of the time, it's a 400 grain or 430 grain bullet.
Flop a coin against the height of that bear you're trying to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're trying to get a heavy bullet.
Right.
A lot of mass, a lot of momentum. That's the reason why you can shoot, say, an elephant or a buffalo or a grizzly bear in that situation with a 45-70 with a 400 grain bullet going 1,500 feet a second, sometimes less, and even less at impact velocity, depending on your shot distance, and it'll still kill it and it'll still go through things. It'll still go through that skull just the same way as a 375 would shooting a 300 grain solid at 2,500 feet a second. Because velocity is a lot less relevant with that bullet type.
Correct.
Because you're not relying on deformation, expansion, cause the damage.
Right.
You're shooting for a different result.
Yeah. So what I like about hammers, okay, I never shot something where I recovered one of these, right? I never shot something where I recovered anything like this.
With a Barnes.
With a Barnes, right. Yep. And I haven't with a hammer either. I've yet to recover a hammer. And I have some of my cartridges here, right? That's my 300 short mag. That's a 168 HHT from Hammer, right? Which stands for Hammer Hunter Tipped. I've got that going about 3,100 feet per second. This is we talked about this a few weeks, a month or two ago now, however long it was. This is a 6mm arc with an 88 grain, just standard Hammer Hunter hollow point, which is what these 338 ones are, right? Those were just Hammer Hunters?
Those were power hammers.
Power hammers, okay.
Yeah.
And then this is a lever hammer specifically designed for lever action to go in a tube so that tip is flattened so it will not set off the next round in the tube and on the primer behind. That is 120 grain lever hammer.
Yep.
Going 2,800 feet per second. This is 276 grain 458 bullet in a 45 loaded in a 45-70 going 2,200 feet per second. Those are what I have used from Hammer and killed animals with. All of them, most of them, multiple animals. And I have had extremely consistent results. Yeah. Now, what we talked about last week is the fact that you may get the same exact shot with the same exact bullet on almost the same size animal on 2 different days, and the animal reacts completely differently. You can't.
They're individuals. Right?
You cannot decide how an animal's going to respond necessarily to the bullet, but the consistency I've had with these is they all look like vastly different bullets, right? It's an array of cartridges and bullets I have here, but that 45-70, now I haven't recovered anything with that one, but the same thing they all have in common is rapid immediate expansion. And that rapid immediate expansion, for one, it is a fast enough expansion that it does not slow the shank of the bullet down a lot like a Barnes, which is part of the reason we don't recover as many, right? Another thing that does is it creates an incredible hydrostatic shock effect, right? Which is that when you see somebody shoot ballistics gel with a hollow point of any kind, you get that expansion, right? They do the slow-mo and you see that big expansion in the gel, and the hydrostatic shock effect on the hammers is like nothing else, right? I've had on a small deer, I've had the gut sucked out the offside hole. Even on bigger deer, I've had I shot a deer in the chest, straight up through the chest, and the bullet traveled up into the guts, and I had bile all the way out to the front entrance of that hole, which seems like how in the world that's the opposite way the bullet traveled and everything, but it's because it went in, it created that shock effect, and when it collapsed upon itself, the pressure has to go somewhere,
right? And
it sucked the bile back to the front, and it also takes it the other direction too, right? you've heard of the depleted uranium tank shells.
Yeah.
Right? Not the same thing. Right? But the effect of it, I remember hearing about them, like, if you hit a tank or a piece of enemy armor with one, the effect it creates is that it will suck anything organic that will fit out the offside hole out, because it creates a suction, and that's something of an effect, something like the effect that a hammer does. And so not only do you have a good wound channel, right, which is what all the other ones have in common, and they all have some form of hydrostatic shock that they cause.
Yep.
But that immediate rapid expansion can't replicate what the put down power of that. It just works really well. And yeah, the speed at which this kills a deer and this kills a deer is a lot. Okay? Because there's a lot more happening. A lot bigger hydrostatic shock with a faster, heavier bullet. And yeah, it doesn't almost matter where you hit a deer with that thing. It seems like they just go down.
Well, within reason.
Within reason, yeah.
Right.
Within reason, yeah. Versus that 88 grain, a perfect shot, they're still going to run. As well, it's an 88 grain bullet. Anyway, that's what I like about hammers. Is I shot a lot of stuff with cup and core cores, they kill great. They really do. Like, there's a reason they were used for a long time. And I mean, it was some of the best technology that was used. But, what was before cup and core and what was before all lead bullets? You've got that one around here, don't you?
Where was it?
I don't know what you did with it. Did you put it up there?
I think I did.
You had
I'm going to grab that.
all lead constructed bullets. And before that, you had lead balls.
Yep. Which
right?
still kill stuff.
They do. And honestly, I mean, when you're talking about what was normally 1,000 grain or more lead ball that flattened out when it hit the target, I don't know if we can even imagine the kind of damage that would do on something like a deer with what we shoot today.
It does a lot of damage.
Right.
But it just flattens out.
It just flattens out.
I mean, we're stepping back in time.
There you go. There's some...
These were given to me, and I was told that they were Civil era.
Civil War?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Civil
era.
I mean,
they look like it.
Civil War era projectiles that were recovered from, like, historic battleground sites.
You can see where they had the back of that open for the powder to burn, because, I mean, you got to keep in mind black powder burned a lot slower.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I really don't have any idea what those would have been fired out of. And
I mean, that's obviously bigger than anything else we have at this table. I mean, that would fit something more like, what was pretty common? Wasn't like a 69 caliber pretty common?
I really couldn't tell you.
But I mean, this is a 458, so that's obviously quite a bit larger, 50 plus, half-inch plus caliber, or something on there. And I don't know what was real popular. Even, I mean, the 50 sharps was real common, right? During the Civil War era and after, so.
But obviously, bullets have come a long way.
Yeah, and obviously they weren't all huge because you've got the small, flat base bullet there. And these bullets killed really well because, well, it's a bullet. And at the end of the day, you're taking a hunk of some sort of metal and you're launching it really fast at the vitals of an animal. And we can nerd out on it all a lot. And I think having the knowledge of a little bit what your bullet does when you shoot it and not just saying, oh, these shoot really well.
Right.
Buying a box of Burger hunting bullets and saying, oh, these shoot really well. And actually having an idea of what they do upon impact.
Just on that note, the other day I happened to see Brady Miller go hunt.
Okay.
He had a post on his Instagram, and it was about burger bullets. And someone had shot, I think it was an elk, and one bullet looked fine that was recovered, and the other one was bent. Mm-hmm. It didn't expand. It bent over, and it didn't expand. I may have seen. I thought I showed it to you.
You might have, yeah, that's probably what it was.
But, he's been shooting a lot of those heavy for caliber, 30 caliber Barnes LRXs out of his 300 Ultra Mag, I think it is. And I want to say it's like a 208 grain out of that rifle. And so he likes the Barnes, and he shot stuff at really long ranges with them, and he likes that bullet. But kind of his point with that little post and discussion about that was that it's not a predictable result with the bullet. That is ultimately where I have a concern with shooting anything that is not tested and verified to be used for hunting purposes. It comes to bullets, everything is designed for a purpose. And a match bullet is designed to shoot really, really well. It's not designed to always have the elite level of consistency that you might want. The tested background in the ballistics lab at the factory, where they shoot these bullets into ballistics gel and into different mediums to check the expansion characteristics of it, and what happens when it impacts at this angle, and what happens when it impacts at this velocity. And they vet all of that with hunting bullets. They don't do that with match bullets. And certainly there are some match bullets that work fine for hunting big game within reason. We mentioned a story about that in an episode a couple weeks ago, talking about a moose that was shot with a 22 caliber with a light bullet, heavy for a 22, but not the type of bullet that we would have necessarily chosen. But it was an experiment. It was to see, what does this bullet do? And the results were totally fine, but can you duplicate that year after year after year? And you're severely hemmed in with your shot angles and with your situation that you're presented. To us, if I'm hunting with a 300 Win Mag, or even my 7 Mag with the right bullet, like a Hammer or even a Barnes, if I have to shoot a moose quartering away at 300 yards, I can, and I'm going to, and it'll kill it, because I know the bullet's going to get there. You mentioned in that episode a couple weeks ago, a friend of yours that shot a moose with a 300 Win Mag with burger bullets. Some of them just flat out grenaded. They did not penetrate. They went in a little bit, and a moose hide is pretty thick. That there are part of this, we referenced it as a trend or a fad earlier. About the small calibers and the small bullets and even the match bullets for big game hunting. Part of that argument for the other side is that, well, the chest of a moose isn't that much wider than the chest of a deer. And while I understand what they're saying, my argument to that is the bones are heavier and thicker. I mean, the shoulder blade of a moose is that big and really that thick in places.
Sure, the chest of a big deer could be a lot bigger than the chest of a small deer.
But then the hide thickness.
But the chest of most moose is bigger than the chest of most deer by a lot.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, it's bigger. But making that comparison and saying, well, you don't necessarily need this much more gun to kill a moose if you're shooting it broadside. I understand that. But add in the hide, add in the density of the bone, add in the element of the shot angle. I want something that, within reason, no matter what the angle is, if a legal moose comes out and I want to kill it, I can.
It comes back to consistency and reliability. And sometimes we do some things like, not necessarily we, but sometimes it's fine to do something like take a 22 arc and shoot a moose with it to do it. But to some extent, most of us aren't trying to get away with shooting. Don't mean to say that's what he was trying to do. We're not trying to see what the biggest animal we can get with the smallest bullet is, right?
Yeah.
We are trying to find the most consistent way, comfortably and consistently kill and bring meat home. That's really what it comes down to. Is there's a lot of adventure aspect and all these kinds of things to it, but really, it comes down to the fact that if you have a rifle that you're capable and sure of at 400 yards for a moose, right? And the fact that if you need to take a quartering shot even at something further than you would like, your bullet, your cartridge is capable of it. And there's a lot to be said for that. And personally, I haven't killed a moose in quite a while. And I don't want to miss my chance at a moose.
Right.
Because it's, quartering away at 300 yards. And that might be the only shot I get.
Right.
And while I mentioned this in the last episode, a 375 might be a lot bigger than what I need.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid of meat damage on a moose because there's a lot of areas to shoot where you're not going to kill, where you're not going to hit meat, right? It's not like I'm going to hit it in the middle of the, if I shot a deer in the center mass with the hammer bullet with a 375, there's a good chance there's be some ripple effect on some meat, right?
Yeah,
you get some bloodshot meat, even if you didn't even, if you just center mass. Obviously I wouldn't center mass the moose with anything, but I can still very reliably hit the vitals on a moose and not damage any meat with 375, and just have that much better of a chance of blowing through whatever I need to blow through to hopefully drop him in his track.
Yep.
Anyway,
well, I think we're going to put a bow on this one. This was a fun discussion.
It was. I liked it.
Yep. Short to the point. I know we had mentioned having a separate episode about just hammer bullets, but kind of figured that this would go well with just this whole bullet discussion.
Go well,
yeah. Just kind of went hand in hand with that. So we hope you enjoyed this little bullet discussion about different types that we have and that we have shot. Mm-hmm. This is all based on what we've tinkered with so far, and there'll be more tinkering in the future. I've got a serious itch to kill stuff with a lever gun right now.
Yeah, well, you haven't really killed anything with a lever gun, have you?
Nope.
I've killed a couple things with one now.
I'm very...
At least 3.
Very much needing to scratch that itch.
It's fun.
Oh, it's very fun. I was out shooting my lever gun the other day in 20 below zero and ringing my 12-inch steel gong at
yards. You sent me a video, yeah.
That was fun. It really pushes that plate around.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. Well, if you like the podcast, folks, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening on. That is a great way to help support the show. And if you feel so compelled, write a positive review for us, and we'd appreciate it if you got any feedback, or hey, if you have bullets that you've recovered from game, or if you have some interesting bullet stories, go ahead and email the podcast at Great Alaska Hunting Podcast
Company.
Company. Great Alaska Hunting Company.com.
Info at Great Alaska Hunting.
Go to our website.
There you go.
And go to the contact button. We do have a website now, so I don't have to remember that email. And go ahead and hit the contact button. You can shoot us an email directly that we'll get to and read. And we'd love to see your pictures of your bullets. That helps us learn and see some different things and different results, and give us the details there. We're always open to learning new things.
If we like your picture enough, you might see it in an episode.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we appreciate the support, folks. Hope you guys are enjoying your winter season and having a good January so far. Spring Bear isn't all that far away.
It's coming.
Yeah, time to do some shooting.
Ready to shoot one with a lever gun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we appreciate the support, folks. And again, if you'd like to watch the episode on YouTube, it is available to watch there as well. This episode was more so geared towards the YouTube audience. So if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and leave us a like and comment. And we'll see you for the next episode.